This is Jim Williams with the Hurricane City Tropical Update video for August 30th, 3 p.m. As usual, I'll start out with the graphical tropical weather outlook from the National Hurricane Center. Let's start with Danielle. Exit stage right in the North Atlantic. This was a major hurricane. Luckily, it did not hit any land masses. Next, we have Earl. We can't say that about Earl. It's already a major hurricane, and it raked the island of St. Martin this morning, although the worst conditions remain well north of the island. But the island of Tortola in the British Virgin Islands, which is north of the U.S. Virgin Islands, is getting hammered pretty good at this hour. I'll show you a radar in just a minute. And we have Invest 97L out in the mid-Atlantic. I know the last few days I've mentioned this could become a tropical depression at any time, but now they've upped it to 90% chance here. So at any moment, this should be upgraded. I think it's already a tropical depression. And this should become Fiona down the road, and we'll have to watch that. And then we have a new area of disturbed weather off of Africa, south of the Cape Verde Islands. This could become Gaston down the road, so there's a lot to keep track of. Nothing unusual for this time of the year, though. Here's a close-up of where Earl is right now, pounding the British Virgin Island of Tortola, which is right here. Inside the red circle are sustained winds of hurricane force, and inside that circle are winds gusting up to 130, 140 miles an hour. I guarantee you that island is going to experience a lot of damage from Hurricane Earl as this continues to move off to the northwest and west-northwest. But back in 2004, here at Hurricane City, we dealt with Hurricane Jean and Francis, which were Category 2, Category 3, respectively. And being about 50 miles south of the center of circulation, we got hit pretty good, so I can only imagine what these people are experiencing on the island of Tortola. I wish them the best of luck, as you'll hear about a lot of damage coming out of there. By the way, we do have radio streaming on the live feed at hurricanecity.tv. We're switching between the Hurricane WatchNet and radio from the Virgin Islands, showing you satellite and radar pictures and recon fixes. But it's going to be really hard to get information out of these areas, at least for the next few days. But we'll monitor it and give you any information we're getting at this end. Now here is the forecast track from the National Hurricane Center, showing the zoomed-in tracking map at Hurricane City. Category 3, soon to be Category 4, and then it makes the turn to the northwest and starts to turn more to the north and north-northeast between Bermuda and the U.S. And, of course, the cone of error stretches all the way over to include the mid-Atlantic coastline and the northeastern United States. But more than likely, with the way the steering flow is right now at that trough in the Atlantic, it's more than likely to hug the right side of this cone rather than the left. But the people in the mid-Atlantic, especially in the northeast here, Cape Cod, may have to deal with the west side of this storm. We'll have to see how close it gets up there. And, of course, Nova Scotia and Newfoundland need to really pay attention to this, as it looks like it'll come flying right in there. All right, here are the models from yesterday. This is important. These are yesterday's models. There's been a lot of talk on canetalk.com about the models shifting to the west. The National Hurricane Center mentioned that. But you got to look at long-term model runs to really get a feel for what a storm is doing. But what you notice here is the definite turn to the north, and then there's some uncertainty up here in the 30 to 35 north range up in here, where there's a little bit of a split. Some take it north, some take it west. But if you go and look at today's models, look at the difference. We have a pronounced turn to the right now in the model consensus, and they're very tightly clustered right around this area of around 33 north. You see there's a very tight clustering of models here, and that shows you that the models are pretty confident in the forecast. When they're tightly clustered like this, there's very strong steering currents, and this is the path that this is going to take. Again, we have a trough coming off the U.S., and we have a high-pressure ridge out here that has a counterclockwise, or clockwise rather, position to the steering flow, and it's going to follow that clockwise steering flow right into the northeast Atlantic, northwest Atlantic, maybe towards Nova Scotia and Newfoundland. But the models are very tightly clustered, and that tells you that they're very confident this is not going to hit the eastern seaboard of the United States. However, like I said, Cape Cod and Long Island and areas up here need to watch for the west side of the system could affect them. And, of course, the Outer Banks could get some high winds out of this, too. I'll just have to wait and see on this. You know, back to St. Martin, though. They were affected early this morning. We had it up on the live feed, the radio and the radar and everything from the island of St. Martin. But I mentioned in yesterday's update video that when you have a very mountainous terrain like this, the wind wavers and goes up and down between the mountain ranges, and it's very inconsistent winds. And sure enough, that's what happened this morning in St. Martin as Hurricane Earl passed just to the north up in here What happened was the winds were mainly out of the west and southwest, bouncing off the mountains and giving them inconsistent readings. I think the highest wind gust we saw in St. Martin was about 68 miles an hour. And I predicted that on the update video yesterday that they would not get any real strong hurricane force winds on that island due to the terrain and the direction of movement of the storm. So that's good news in St. Martin. A little bit further north, there's an island called Anguilla up in here that might have some heavier damage or some reported roof damage as they were closer to the center of circulation. Now here is the best performing model so far on Hurricane Earl. And it shows this splitting between Bermuda and the U.S. and heading up in the general direction of Newfoundland. Now this is the AP07, the Aviation Ensemble Model number 7. This is the ensemble model, interpolated rather, meaning additional data that went into that model. And this has been the best model, off by about 395 miles, and that's not really saying very much. That's a pretty poor performance, actually. In fact, a lot of the models have been off by as much as 500 miles on this system. So the models have not handled this system very well at all. But this is the best of the worst, taking it between Bermuda and the U.S. and up into Newfoundland. This does not mean this is the track it's going to take. I just like to pass this along to let people know what model is performing the best. And which model is performing the best on Invest 97L? Well, here it is, the AVNO. And the AVNO is showing that this is going to cruise off to the west-northwest, become Fiona, and pretty much just come in pretty much a similar course to what happened with Hurricane Earl this morning and yesterday, moving through the northern Leeward Islands and generally toward the Bahamas. We have a long time to watch this one, but that's the model thinking on this. Now, what are the models saying as far as intensity is concerned? Here are the intensity forecast models from tropicalatlantic.com, and the best performing model as far as intensity is the AVNO model, which is this red track right here, this track right here. But the problem is this is starting off initializing this very poorly, showing this only getting up to around 85 miles an hour. Now we're already up around 130, so let's go based on the green model here, which is the AEMI. I'm sorry, that's the IVCN model, and that has it peaking out here around Category 5 status in about 30 hours, and then quickly drops off around day 4 to about, it keeps it at Category 3 hurricane for about 3 days, and then day 4 it starts to weaken, and then day 5, when it's up near Nova Scotia or Newfoundland, it'd be down to Category 2 strength. I think it's going to weaken a little bit faster than that myself due to the dry air and wind shear. I'll get to a water vapor loop in just a minute. Now, what are all the named storms in history that were in the same exact position as Hurricane Earl is in right now, and where did they go? Well, back in 1888, we had a hurricane come through the Bahamas, hit Cuba, go down into the Yucatan. We had a 1933 hurricane come into West Palm Beach, Florida, that went right through the Bahamas, right into the state. But all the rest of the storms pretty much curved out into the open Atlantic. Hurricane Dog, and a no-name storm 1932, and another no-name storm in 1889. All of them were pretty much fish storms. So the only one that was of any significance that was in the same position around this same time of the year between August 30th and September 1st was the 1933 hurricane that hit West Palm Beach, Florida. Now here's the forecast for Earl going out to September 3rd, which is Friday, this coming Friday. Here's the closest point of approach to the northeastern United States, and it's about 94 miles east-southeast of Nantucket Island and about 160 miles east of Boston, Massachusetts. So that's where the turn is going to take place, and then from there it'll head off towards maybe Nova Scotia or Newfoundland. But if this pans out, the most that would happen is they'll get some northerly tropical storm force gust in the Cape Cod area and maybe eastern areas of Long Island, but this would be very good news if this forecast pans out. That's the official forecast from the National Hurricane Center. Now everybody asks, well, Jim, what makes you so sure that this system is going to pass north of the Leeward Island, east of the United States coastline? Well, this is from sailweather.info showing the pressures out there right now. And generally, you like to look for about 1015, 1016 millibars as your steering flow of a high pressure. And that's right here. generally like this. There's your high pressure ridge over here. And anything down here is kind of losing its steering current. So that's where we're at with Earl right now. It's like this, and now it's starting to follow this line right here as the point of recurvature right here. So that's what you look for is pressures. And right now the pressures are lower over here, so a hurricane is going to follow the path of least resistance, which is lower pressure, heading up between Bermuda and the United States. The question is, how close is it going to get to the United States? This is an interesting shot of the Atlantic, and the only reason I'm showing this is it really shows you how connected these storms are out in the Atlantic. And let me show you what I'm talking about. Here's Hurricane Earl, and look at the outflow from Earl is being brought into the inflow from what will be Tropical Storm Fiona, and Fiona's outflow is tied into this new tropical wave south of the Cape Verde Island. So it's really interesting to see how these storms are all interconnected in the intertropical convergence zone, and they feed off each other and they take away from each other as they move across the Atlantic. It's a fascinating visible shot right there. All right, let's take a look at the radar from the northern Leeward Islands. Here we go. Let's zoom in on this and show you what's happening. There's our center of circulation right near the island of Tortola, rather. And look at the deep reds. Anywhere you see deep reds on this radar, our winds up to 130, 140 miles an hour. God help those people on the island of Tortola. They're just absolutely getting slammed right now. Here's our floater loop of our system, and notice the nice eye that pops in on this thing in the last frame here. This is well on its way to becoming a Category 4 hurricane. Can only imagine the hell that's going on under that eye wall right now. And here's the recon fixes from the hurricane hunters. Last fix is 955 millibars. It's been dropping all day, and the maximum flight level winds are 116 knots, about 130 miles an hour in the northeast quadrant of the hurricane. And we have a closed circular eye wall. Maximum temperature on the inside of the eye is 9 degrees Celsius. Maximum on the outside of the eye is 15. And generally, when you see that big of a difference between the inner and outer eye wall temperatures, you usually have a very rapidly strengthening hurricane, and that's exactly what we have here. Finally, I want to show you the water vapor loop of the Atlantic Basin. And let me pan this out and show you what's happening here. Here is Hurricane Earl, but what's happening is we have a deep trough out here. Look at this. Dry air and a deep trough, and this is following Hurricane Danielle, by the way. But here, the weakness, high pressure ridge is out here, and the weakness is right here. And once this gets up in here, it's going to run into wind shear and dry air. That's why I think this is going to weaken a little bit faster than the National Hurricane Center. They're holding on to it to major hurricane status all the way up here around 38 degrees north. I think it's going to weaken a little quicker when it's down in this area here. We'll have to see on that. But dry air and shear. Now, the thinking is, again, there's going to be a huge weakness in the wind pressure fields up here, and I think that this is going to take a track maybe about 100 to 150 miles east of Cape Hatteras, North Carolina, and then head up towards Nova Scotia and clip the Cape Cod area. That's my thinking on this due to the steering out here. But here comes 97L cruising off to the west, and the model indications are indicating that this is going to follow the weakness of Hurricane Earl right up towards Bermuda, actually weakening as it heads towards Bermuda. Now, one more thing I want to mention, and that is the European model, which is a very good model, indicates this is going to come within about 100 miles of the coast of the Outer Banks and North Carolina, and then start to wash out up here as it enters the northeastern areas right near Nova Scotia and maybe New Brunswick. But the Euro is a very good model, and it has it very close to the Outer Banks. Now, while we're speaking of the Euro also showed that Fiona out here, 2 days ago it had it in South Carolina. The day before yesterday it had it in North Florida, and then yesterday early it had it through Florida, and then late in the afternoon it had it through the Florida Straits. But today the Euro is back to showing this actually going north and following Earl up here. So all indications right now are that we have a weakness up here that's going to remain, and these systems are going to find their way out into the open Atlantic. All I can say at this point is for people in the northeastern United States, pay very close attention to Earl. You may have to secure some loose items. This could come close to the northeastern United States. Anyway, keep track of the models, keep track of the latest at hurricanecity.com, and check out hurricanecity.tv. We're still going to stream radio from the Virgin Islands as Earl moves away. Thank you again for visiting Hurricane City.